There was a moment in my life when I believed strength lived in my hands, in my shoulders, in the way my body could move through space and leave a mark behind. I thought if I could train hard enough, strike fast enough, endure longer than others, I would become unbreakable. But time and silence taught me something deeper. The body is only the surface. The true battlefield is inside. Every day, before the world asks anything of you, your own mind already does. It asks if you will rise or remain where you are. It asks if you will meet difficulty or turn away from it. It asks if you will act from clarity or from habit. These questions are quiet, but they shape everything that follows. I began to notice how often my reactions were not choices at all, but patterns. A sharp word would trigger a sharp response. A challenge would stir impatience. A moment of uncertainty would invite doubt. None of these came from the situation itself, they came from the habits I carried inside. So I turned my training inward, not away from the world but toward the space where my responses were born. I started to watch myself in small moments. The way my breath changed when I felt challenged. The way my shoulders tightened when I felt judged. The way my thoughts rushed ahead when I wanted control instead of understanding. At first, this watching felt uncomfortable. It is easier to see flaws in others than to sit with your own. But I learned that discomfort is a doorway. When you stay with it, it opens into awareness. And awareness is the beginning of mastery. I made a simple rule for myself: I would not try to change anything I did not first understand. When anger rose, I did not push it away. I felt where it lived in my body. When fear appeared, I did not shame it. I listened to what it was trying to protect. These emotions were not enemies, they were signals. The problem was not their presence, it was my blindness to them. Through this, I began to create space between what I felt and what I did. That space is small, almost invisible, but it holds great power. In that space you can choose. Without it, you simply react, and a life of reaction is a life shaped by whatever happens to pass in front of you. There were days when this choice felt heavy, when the easier path was to speak quickly, to move quickly, to push forward without thinking. But each time I paused instead, each time I breathed instead of tightening, I felt a different kind of strength growing, not the strength of force but the strength of control. Control does not mean suppression, it means direction. A river that is blocked becomes stagnant. A river that is guided becomes powerful. I learned to guide my inner currents instead of damming them or letting them flood everything in their path. This practice began in stillness, but it did not stay there. It followed me into every part of my day. In conversation, I listened not just to words but to the space between them. In conflict, I noticed my own urge to win instead of understand. In success, I watched for the quiet rise of pride that could make me careless. The more I paid attention, the more I saw how subtle the mind can be. It does not always announce its intentions. It hides them behind stories, behind justifications, behind habits that feel normal because they are familiar. To master yourself, you must become a careful observer of these stories. There was a time when I believed that being unbreakable meant never feeling weakness. I know now that it means never being ruled by it. You will feel doubt, you will feel fear, you will feel anger and fatigue and longing. These are part of being human. The difference is not whether they appear, the difference is whether they decide for you. Each day I practiced choosing to stay when I wanted to leave, choosing to listen when I wanted to speak, choosing to move forward when I wanted to rest in comfort. These were not grand, heroic decisions, they were small, almost ordinary, but they repeated, and in repetition they became something solid. I also learned that self-mastery is not a destination. It is a relationship. Some days the relationship is easy, the mind is clear, the body responds, the path feels open. Other days everything feels resistant. On those days the work is not to force progress but to maintain connection, to stay engaged even when the results are not visible. There were moments when I failed, when I reacted instead of choosing, when I let frustration lead my actions. These moments used to feel like proof that I was not strong enough. Now I see them as reminders that the practice is ongoing. Each failure is a chance to return, to begin again with a little more understanding than before. Over time, this way of living changed how I experienced the world. Situations that once felt overwhelming became manageable, not because they were easier but because I was steadier. The storms still came, the ground still shifted, but I learned how to stand within the movement instead of being thrown by it. People often look for something dramatic when they seek strength. A technique, a secret, a moment of transformation. What I found was quieter and more demanding. Strength is built in the way you meet each moment, especially the ones no one else sees. It is built when you keep your word to yourself, when you rise even when no one is watching, when you choose patience in a moment that invites anger, when you continue in silence instead of seeking recognition. These actions do not create stories that travel far. They create a foundation that holds you when everything else is uncertain. As this foundation grew, I felt a shift in how I carried myself. My movements became less rushed. My words became more measured. My presence became more grounded. I was no longer trying to prove anything. I was simply practicing being aligned with my own standards. This alignment is what makes a person difficult to break. Not because they are hard, but because they are whole. When your actions match your values, when your words match your intentions, when your inner world and outer world move in the same direction, there is less space for conflict inside you. The world can push against you. It can challenge you, criticize you, test you, but if you are not divided within yourself, those pressures have less to grab onto. You bend, but you do not shatter. I also came to understand that self-mastery brings a different kind of compassion. When you see how much work it takes to guide your own mind, you become more patient with the struggles of others. You listen more, you judge less, you recognize the battles that are invisible on the surface. This does not make you soft, it makes you steady, and steadiness has its own quiet strength. In the end, being unbreakable is not about becoming something other than human. It is about becoming fully responsible for the human you are, for your thoughts, your reactions, your choices, your direction. You cannot control the world, but you can control the way you meet it. And in that meeting, again and again, you shape the person you become. Stand guard over your own mind, and no force outside you will ever truly own your path. There is a comfort that feels gentle at first, like a warm place to rest after a long walk. It tells you that you have done enough, that you deserve to stop, that tomorrow will always be there waiting. I listened to that voice once and I learned how quietly it can soften the edge of your will. It does not challenge you, it invites you, and in accepting its invitation you begin to trade strength for ease without even noticing the exchange. I began to see how small comforts stack upon each other: an extra moment of sleep, a skipped practice, a decision to avoid a difficult conversation. Each one feels harmless alone, but together they shape a habit of retreat. The path becomes smoother, and in becoming smoother it becomes weaker. So I chose to meet difficulty on purpose. Not recklessly, not to punish myself, but to remind myself of what it feels like to stand in resistance and remain steady. I would walk the longer way, hold the position a little longer, stay present in moments that invited distraction. These were my quiet ways of reinforcing the armor inside. Through this, I learned that resilience is not built in moments of crisis alone. It is built in these small, daily choices to stay with what is uncomfortable but honest. Over time, the things that once felt heavy begin to feel familiar. The mind stops running at the first sign of strain. Comfort will always wait for you, it is patient, but strength is built only when you step past it again and again. And each time you do, you become harder to move from your path.